Our generation has always haggled over electronic technologies and has never farmed without it. Yet this struggle has been ongoing since the Industrial Revolution. Inventors and producers have always argued over who maintains ownership of the information collected from these technologies. Today, I hope our discussion will allow for solutions for big data as it is necessary for precision agriculture.
Never before in the history of mankind have farmers and ranchers had so many tools and technology at their use for their success. Farmers and ranchers are continually striving to be more efficient and more productive with fewer inputs and fewer costs. As these technologies advance and move forward, we need to work hand in hand with the tech companies as well as government agencies to assure that we are solving the problems that arise in this new environment. As we practice this, we will be able to continue to feed a starving population.
There's no doubt that intellectual and proprietary information can serve to help the agricultural industry what past we ever thought. However, it is most important that we be sure that the ownership of this property stays in the hands of the farmers, so that it may not be used against us by our adversaries or to fault our industry.
Every generation has passed down one item of intellectual property, either how you raise a certain crop, being able to take care of animals correctly, as well as making sure that your offspring are able to continue the operation. So being able to protect this is huge in protecting our tradition as American agriculturists. I'm excited to see how we look from generation to generation, as well as how the advancements have helped us be able to feed the world with only 2% of America's population.
You have heard the opening statements. Competitors, please direct your discussion towards each other. You may begin.
As we discuss this topic, I think one of the things that we should discuss in the beginning is the importance of private property rights. This is something that is very tangible when we think of our physical property, but as we're discussing this over intellectual and proprietary information, any decision or any law that's enacted over proprietary information can have an impact on our tangible assets, our physical property. And that's one thing as farmers and ranchers that we hold sacred is our private property rights. And so as we discuss, I think that's one area that we could focus on. How is that affecting private property rights? Both Charles and Jessica, you both mentioned generational type questions or generational type issues. Jessica, you said that our generation doesn't know anything other than technology. How can we use our generational information to help influence not only our older generation, but those generations to come?
We can use the technologies available to us. We can, in several ways, we can help our fellow farmers come to terms with how it is serving us good. A lot of people become concerned when they feel that those technologies could do more damage than good. But what we need to look at first is how far we have come with technologies at our hand. We've improved efficiency. We have reduced costs. We have reduced labor necessary in order to maintain our operations and grow our crops and raise our animals. But I think what the big concern is with our technologies and intellectual property is that it's not going to do harm towards us, that we are able to maintain our trade secrets for our own individual farms, because nobody wants to give up what gives us the edge. They want to maintain that, but at the same time, we have to be careful in how those technologies, we need to be at the forefront and be working with our government agencies, because we still are on the forefront with this. You know, new technologies that are here today weren't here 10 years ago. So we can use this opportunity as Farm Bureau members to be on the forefront of helping guide those regulations, because it's all still pretty new to a lot of us.
Jessica, I think that's a great point that you say that there's still technology out there that's going to create problems we haven't even thought about yet, so we definitely are on the forefront. Charles, you also mentioned generational type concerns. What are some of your concerns as far as our generation and the next generation, and then we can help address the specifics of the question.
Yeah, but I'm also, so with the generations, I'm thinking of our ancestors. What do they do? How do they do it? Because some of the things, when we look at technology, it's a great asset, but it's still not perfect. So if we look at things that we've done in the past, so if you are a cattle rancher, you're still going to probably graze on public lands, and you're still going to be utilizing it to the best of your ability. And we already know how much that we're able to use that land for. But then if we just continue to just punch numbers into a computer and try to have that take its course or tell us what to do, then we're forgetting about how our families maybe even start their operations. So if we look at the generations and look back at it, like you were mentioning earlier, Jessica, when we look back, we're able to see, and we are able to use that new technology to try to push us forward to be able to meet that demand that we're faced with every day.
I agree. I think the experience that the generations before us, our fathers, our grandfathers, our mothers, our grandmothers, actually brings strength to us moving towards the future and embracing these technologies that can help promote us into the future so that we can further, adapt those efficiencies, because as we know, the world population is growing and we have to adapt these in order to remain strong into the future.
Well, and some of the parallels that I've noticed that each and every one of us seem to draw with our opening statements and what we're saying now is some of these things, they work great for us. And in other senses, they work against us. So why, how do we find that balance in terms of regulations? Because like you said, Jessica, much of this is very new, and how much more is to come. And it's not even just for trade secrets. I mean, there's some farmers who don't want this information shared because they don't want those in their county to see their own personal information. But where do we draw the line? Because sharing this information could be very beneficial for the industry.
I actually have an excellent example from my state. In our state, we have regulated, mandated nutrient management plans that we have to follow. And years ago, our Farm Bureau actually sued Maryland Department of Agriculture because we were concerned that private information from our farmers was going to be put out to the public. And as we know, our farms are a business, and we did not want our individual farm information being put out there that those special interest groups could come back and use against us or pull or pick apart our individual farmers and break us apart.
Farm Bureau, as you mentioned, Jessica, that sounds like that was on a state level. On a national level, Farm Bureau actually sued the EPA for something very similar. The EPA released information from farmers in 29 different states, which that information, EPA argued that information was information open to the general public under the Freedom of Information Act. However, the farmers and ranchers view that as their proprietary information, their personal and private information, which should not be made public. I think that's one way to answer your question, Reece. How do we draw that fine line? We talked about private property rights. There's also some privacy laws that should be kept in order, kept in place. Unfortunately, we've all heard of ag-gag laws and ag-gag law issues, where somebody is filming or viewing inappropriate or filming information on a farm or a plant, and then they're making that public information. I don't understand why that's different in a farming or ranching operation, because somebody that's filming private activities in your home or in your backyard, that's against the law to make that public property. So one thing we could do is we could enforce those privacy laws at a business level. The actions, the processes and procedures that are taking place on our farms, not only are they proprietary information, but they should be maintained as private information as well.
Well, and I think it's a balance between the two spectrums. You have a policy level, whether it's federal or state, where we need some verbiage or some rules that are going to kind of protect the industry. But at the same time, I mean, after all, many of these companies we're working with, you're looking at John Deere, Simplot, all these companies, they're ag companies. I mean, they're not really out to damage us. Should we really have to worry about them utilizing our information that really should be ours? Maybe, we don't know, but work with them. We need to have a better relationship, because it can better the industry if we work together.
I agree with you, Reece, for sure, that with these other entities, and I'm also just thinking about us, peers. We have all these ideas, we have things that have been tried and true, and sometimes, well, it's our livelihood, so when we are sharing, it's really tough because you don't want somebody else to outdo you, but you do want to benefit the agricultural industry as a whole. So what you're mentioning, Madison, is how do we kind of protect that, and with the middle line too, how much is too much to be shared? Because we want to feed the world, that's what we're charged with. We want to be able to produce the best product out there that's safe. And with this, I'm not saying let's be open about everything, but if we're open, that's going to help hopefully alleviate these issues of people feeling that we're hiding something.
I think one solution to some of the problems we're bringing up would be full disclosure requirements on behalf of the tech companies, whether that's pesticide and herbicide companies that are coming out to spray our farms, whether that's the GPS monitoring companies, whether it's the manufacturers of the equipment. If there's a full disclosure requirement between the company and the farmer, too many times as farmers, we're against the consumer. Well, in this instance, the farmer is the consumer. We're receiving the benefit of all of that technology, but we're also paying for it. And we have certain rights as consumers, which we've unfortunately had used against us in other examples, but as the consumer purchasing and paying very good money for some of those technologies, we should know completely what we are getting into. Who owns the data? Do we maintain ownership to a certain level? What requirements are we required, or what requirements for those services do we need? At a certain level of ownership, does it change the pricing structure? And there are a lot of different things that if you have a contractual obligation, a contractual discussion in the beginning of the process and disclose everything up front, there shouldn't be any of this, well, who owns it? It's mine, it's yours, it's mine, it's yours. No, it should be upfront, transparent, and in the beginning. I think that's one direction that we could go to solve many of these problems, or preempt some of the problems.
Right, but I think, maybe simplification is always good too. I mean, how long are some of these contracts that we read through before we purchase seed or something like that? How many of us actually read them is another question. Nor have the time to read them, even though we should, but, work with the companies, let's simplify it. I mean, does some of this come from fear? I mean, with the data, not much of it has happened yet, but do we fear maybe what rights some of these companies have because the length of some of these contracts and the verbiage in it?
I think some of the concern that you mentioned, Reece, is that farmers have tried to be open in the past and they've been burnt. Mm-hmm. So now they're very cautious and they're scared to be burnt again. I think part of some of the solution that you were suggesting, Addison, is that we have that partnership with the companies in which we're working with that are providing us these technologies. And then the information that's gathered, yes, we as a producer, farmer, and rancher are utilizing that to make our farms productive, efficient, and stay on the forefront so that we can, hopefully continue our farming to the next generation. But I think in following with, or adding to the solution was that the information that's gathered from these companies is going up into the cloud. And I think a lot of our current farmers, which tend to be more on the older part of our generation, around that 65-year-old mark, they're not as comfortable utilizing it. They don't quite understand. Yes, they've gone out and purchased that equipment or that technology, but they don't have a full understanding. Yes, I signed the contract because I need that equipment to function these days, but I'm not fully utilizing it, the potential of it, because it's known today that only 5% of our farmers and ranchers are truly, fully utilizing our precision agriculture. They may have the equipment, but they're not utilizing it to the full benefit because they are still cautious and unsure. So they're putting that partnership, which includes trust to those companies, that they're not going to do wrong with it. And that kind of comes back to, Addison, you had mentioned that full disclosure.
Yeah, full disclosure would give you the opportunity as a farmer. Yeah, that they're long contracts, there's a lot of information in there, but the value is there, I think, if you go through those. One of the reasons I think that would be valuable is because as we go through these, we know up front. We know, okay, is this going to be stored in the cloud, or is it going to be stored on a database at my office? Is it going to be at the manufacturer's office? It might not be considered a contractual meeting, but it might be an information sharing session of where are these questions. And to be honest, some of us might not even know the questions to ask. I think one way that we can help not only change the entire industry, and this is looking into the future,